I still remember the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a nightmare, watching as my parents orchestrated their public humiliation of me on the most sacred day of my sister's life, our family's wedding. It's a day that's etched in my memory like a scar, a constant reminder of the pain and betrayal I felt as I stood there, trying to make sense of it all. My name is Emily, and my sister's name is Sarah. We've always been close, despite our parents' efforts to drive a wedge between us. As I look back, I realize that our parents' behavior was just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a much deeper issue that would eventually tear our family apart. As I stood in that crowded reception hall, surrounded by the people I loved and the food and music that was supposed to be celebrating my sister's special day, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider. My parents, Karen and Michael, had made it clear that I wasn't part of the inner circle anymore, that I was just an afterthought in their grand scheme of things. They'd been planning this wedding for months, pouring all of our family's resources into making it the most extravagant and memorable day of Sarah's life. And I'd been expected to just go along with it, to smile and pretend like everything was okay, even when it wasn't. I remember the day they told me where I'd be sitting, near the kitchen, with the catering staff. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, like all the air had been sucked out of me. It was a deliberate move, a way of humiliating me in front of our friends and family. And it was all because I'd been asking questions, trying to get to the bottom of where all the money was coming from. My grandma, Margaret, had left me a trust fund when she passed away, specifically for my education and future. But my parents had always been vague about the details, and I'd started to suspect that they were using that money for the wedding instead. As I watched my parents mingle with the guests, laughing and chatting like they didn't have a care in the world, I felt a wave of anger wash over me. How could they do this to me? How could they so callously disregard my feelings and my future? I thought about getting up and walking out, about making a scene and causing a commotion. But something held me back. Maybe it was the fear of embarrassing my sister on her special day, or maybe it was just the hope that things would somehow, miraculously, get better. But as the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My parents were being too secretive, too evasive. And then, just as the reception was getting into full swing, my grandma stood up. She's a petite woman with a fiery spirit and a sharp tongue. And when she speaks, people listen. I remember feeling a sense of trepidation as she began to talk, a sense of foreboding that something was about to go terribly wrong. At first, I thought she was just going to give a toast, to welcome everyone and celebrate my sister's marriage. But as she started to speak, I realized that something more was going on. Her voice was shaking with anger, her eyes flashing with a fierce determination. And then, in a moment that would change everything, she dropped the bombshell. The wedding, she revealed, had been paid for using a combination of family savings and money from my own college fund, the one that she'd specifically set aside for me. The room fell silent, like a collective gasp had sucked all the air out of it. And I stood there, frozen in shock, as my world came crashing down around me. I remember the days when my younger sister, Emily, and I were inseparable. We'd spend hours playing dress-up, sharing our deepest secrets and giggling together until our sides hurt. Our parents, Karen and Michael, would often smile and say how lucky they were to have two daughters who got along so well. But as we grew older, I started to notice subtle changes in the way they treated us. It was almost imperceptible at first, but over time, it became harder to ignore. They'd praise Emily for her achievements, no matter how small, and lavish her with gifts and attention. I, on the other hand, would receive a passing comment or a faint smile, as if my accomplishments were somehow less worthy. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe Karen and Michael just didn't know how to show love in a way that resonated with me. Maybe they were just more naturally inclined to connect with Emily's bubbly personality. But the truth was, it stung. I felt like I was living in the shadow of my sister's perfection, always trying to measure up but never quite reaching the mark. I'd watch as Karen and Michael beamed with pride at Emily's school plays, sports events, and art exhibitions, while I'd receive a cursory, "Good job, sweetie," for my own efforts. As we entered our teenage years, the disparity between us grew wider. Karen and Michael would often discuss college funds and future plans, but it was always in hushed tones, as if they were sharing a secret that I wasn't meant to hear. They'd promised to set aside money for both of us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were favoring Emily's interests over mine. And then, when our grandmother passed away, everything changed. She left behind a trust fund with a very specific stipulation. It was for my education and future, not Emily's. I remember feeling a mix of emotions, sadness at her passing, but also a sense of relief and security knowing that I had a safety net to fall back on. But whenever I brought it up with Karen, she'd brush it off, saying that Grandma must have changed her mind or forgotten. It was as if she was trying to downplay the significance of the trust fund, making me wonder if I'd just imagined the whole thing. I'd try to talk to Michael about it, but he'd just smile and tell me not to worry, that everything would work out. It was frustrating, because I knew that Grandma had been very clear about her intentions. She'd always been a bit of a firecracker, and I knew she wouldn't have left anything to chance. As Emily's wedding approached, I noticed that Karen and Michael were being particularly secretive about their financial arrangements. They'd whisper to each other in huddles, glancing over at me with a mix of guilt and disdain. It was as if they were hiding something, and I couldn't help but feel that it was related to the trust fund. I'd ask them what was going on, but they'd just smile sweetly and tell me not to worry, that everything would work out. It was infuriating, because I knew they were hiding something from me. I remember one evening, we were all sitting in the living room, discussing the wedding details. Emily was going on and on about the flowers, the cake, and the music, while Karen and Michael were exchanging these furtive glances. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, watching as they made decisions that would affect my life without even consulting me. I tried to bring up the topic of the trust fund, but Karen quickly changed the subject, saying we should focus on the wedding instead. It was like they were trying to avoid the elephant in the room, and I was starting to feel like I was the only one who saw it. Looking back, I realized that I was trying to hold on to the idea that my family was perfect, that we were all in this together. But the truth was, we were fractured, and the cracks were starting to show. Karen and Michael's favoritism towards Emily had created a rift between us, and I was starting to feel like I was just an afterthought. As the wedding day drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that there was a storm brewing on the horizon. Little did I know, it would be a day that would change everything, a day that would expose the secrets and lies that had been simmering beneath the surface of our family for years. I still remember the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a nightmare, watching as my parents orchestrated their public humiliation of me on the most sacred day of my sister's life, our family's wedding. The morning had started out normally enough. I'd woken up early, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves as I got ready for the big day ahead. My mom was already up, bustling around the kitchen as she prepared breakfast for everyone. My dad was nowhere to be found, but that wasn't unusual. He often claimed he needed some alone time before family events. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, my mom called out from the living room, "Hey, sweetie, can you come help me with something?" I walked in to find her frantically folding and refolding the napkins for the reception. She seemed anxious, glancing at me every few seconds as if checking to see if I was paying attention. "Mom, what's going on? You seem really stressed out," I said, trying to sound calm. "Oh, don't worry about it, honey. It's just last-minute stuff. Your dad will help us get everything sorted out," she replied distractedly. I felt a twinge of unease at her dismissive tone, but pushed it aside, thinking maybe she was just overwhelmed with wedding planning. Later that morning, as we were all getting into our cars to head to the venue, my parents called me over. "Hey, kiddo, can I talk to you for a sec?" my dad said, his voice low and serious. I stepped out of earshot from my sister, who was busy arguing with her hair stylist about the perfect updo. My heart sank as I realized we were going to have another one of those dreaded talks that always seemed to leave me feeling like a disappointment. "What's up?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "We need you to sit with the catering staff today," my dad said, his eyes darting around nervously. "We thought it would be better if you helped out with some of the logistical stuff." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, another blow to my self-worth. Wasn't enough that they'd been favoring my sister over me for years, making me feel invisible and unimportant. "Okay," I managed to stammer, trying not to show how hurt I was. My dad handed me a small tag with catering staff scribbled on it. "Just stick this on your lapel and you'll be good to go," he said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. As we arrived at the venue, I took my place among the catering staff, watching from the sidelines as our family mingled with the guests. My sister was beaming with pride, completely oblivious to the fact that her family was basically treating me like dirt. I tried to shake off the feelings of resentment and anger, telling myself it wasn't a big deal, just another small price I'd have to pay for being part of this dysfunctional family. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a painful reminder that no matter how much love I thought I had for my family, they didn't seem to feel the same way about me. I stood there, seething and helpless, as our parents began introducing themselves to the guests, making a big show about how they'd splurged on this dream wedding for their beloved daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister's happiness was all that mattered, but mine was an afterthought. As the tension in the room continued to build, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises were in store for me today. And then, just as we were about to start the ceremony, Grandma stood up from her seat and took the microphone. I still remember the feeling of my heart sinking as I watched Grandma stand up, her eyes scanning the room with a sense of determination. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now that it was finally here, she was ready to take a stand. My parents, who had been beaming with pride just moments before, suddenly looked like they had been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. My sister, Emily, seemed oblivious to the tension, still smiling and chatting with our guests, but I could sense a hint of confusion in her eyes. As Grandma began to speak, her voice was calm and measured, but it carried a weight that commanded attention. She looked directly at my parents, her gaze piercing and unyielding. "I think it's time we all knew the truth," she said, her words dripping with a sense of gravity. "The truth about how this wedding was paid for and the promises that were broken in the process." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized where this was going. I had suspected that something was off, but I had no idea that Grandma knew the full extent of what had been going on. My parents exchanged a nervous glance, and for a moment, I thought they might try to interrupt her, but Grandma was having none of it. She continued to speak, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each passing moment. "This wedding, which has been touted as a celebration of love and family, has actually been paid for using a combination of family savings and money from my trust fund." She paused, surveying the room with a sense of disdain. "Money that was specifically set aside for my granddaughter, Rachel's, education and future." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I had suspected that my parents might be using some of the family money to pay for the wedding, but I had no idea that they had dipped into my college fund. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, and for a moment, I thought I might actually pass out. My eyes met Emily's, and for a fleeting instant, I thought I saw a glimmer of understanding there. But it was quickly replaced by a look of confusion and concern. Grandma wasn't finished yet. She pulled out a small stack of papers from her purse and began to read aloud from them. "The terms of my trust are clear. The money is to be used for Rachel's education and future, not for lavish weddings or any other purpose." Her voice was firm and unyielding, and I could sense the weight of her words settling over the room like a shroud. The silence that followed was oppressive, like a physical presence that pressed down on us all. I couldn't bear to look at my parents, who were now staring at the floor in shame. I couldn't bear to look at Emily, who seemed like she was trying to process the fact that her wedding had been paid for with money that wasn't hers to take. All I could do was sit there, frozen in shock and horror, as the truth finally came to light. Grandma's words had changed everything, and I knew that our family would never be the same again. As I sat there, trying to process the enormity of what had just happened, I felt a sense of emotions swirling inside me. There was anger, of course, and a deep sense of betrayal. But there was also a sense of vindication, of finally being seen and heard. Grandma had stood up for me, had fought for me, and had revealed the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. It was a turning point, a moment of reckoning that would change the course of our family's history forever. In that moment, I knew that I would never be able to go back to the way things were before. I would never be able to trust my parents in the same way again, not after what they had done. But I also knew that I wasn't alone, that I had Grandma on my side. And with her support, I felt a sense of strength and determination that I had never felt before. I was ready to stand up for myself, to fight for my future, and to make sure that I would never again be treated like an afterthought. The question was, what would happen next? Would my parents try to make amends, or would they continue to deny and deflect? And what would happen to our family now that the truth was finally out? Only time would tell, but one thing was for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. I remember the moments that followed Grandma's bombshell like they're etched into my brain. The room was in complete chaos, with gasps and whispers spreading like wildfire. I saw my parents' faces turn bright red, their eyes darting back and forth as if searching for an escape route. My sister, Emily, looked like she'd been punched in the gut, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. I felt a pang of sadness for her, knowing that her special day had just been turned upside down. As for me, I was still trying to process everything that was happening. Grandma's words had been like a balm to my soul, soothing the wounds that had been festering for years. I felt seen, heard, and valued for the first time in what felt like an eternity. But at the same time, I was scared. I had no idea what the future held, or how my family would react to Grandma's announcement. Grandma, on the other hand, seemed completely unfazed by the commotion she'd caused. She stood tall, her eyes flashing with determination, as she began to outline her plan for taking control of the family finances. She explained that she would be working with me to create a new budget, one that would prioritize my education and future. She also made it clear that she would be keeping a close eye on my parents, ensuring that they didn't make any more reckless decisions with our family's money. As she spoke, I felt a sense of hope rising up inside me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had an ally, someone who was on my side and willing to fight for me. I glanced over at my parents, who were still looking like they'd been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. My mom was trying to compose herself, but I could see the anger and resentment simmering just below the surface. My dad, on the other hand, looked like he'd been deflated, his usual bravado and confidence gone. Emily, my sister, was still looking stunned, like she was trying to wrap her head around what was happening. I felt a pang of guilt for her, knowing that her wedding day had been ruined by our family's drama. But at the same time, I was angry with her for being so oblivious to the fact that our parents had been treating me like dirt. I knew she wasn't malicious, but her lack of awareness had still hurt me deeply. As the room continued to buzz with tension, Grandma suggested that we take a break and regroup later to discuss the details of her plan. I nodded in agreement, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Grandma by my side, I felt like I could finally start to rebuild my life and create a better future for myself. As we filed out of the reception hall, I caught Grandma's eye and smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude and love for this fierce and fearless woman. She smiled back, her eyes twinkling with warmth and understanding. In that moment, I knew that everything was going to be okay. I had Grandma, and together, we would face whatever challenges came our way. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of activity, as Grandma and I worked together to sort out our family's finances and create a new plan for my future. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of ups and downs along the way. But with Grandma's guidance and support, I slowly began to rebuild my sense of self-worth and confidence. I started to see that I was worthy of love and respect, regardless of what my parents had done. Looking back, I realized that Grandma's intervention was a turning point for me. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one in which I would take control of my own destiny and create a brighter future for myself. It wasn't always easy, and there were plenty of challenges along the way. But with Grandma by my side, I knew that I could overcome anything. And as I look back on that fateful wedding day, I'm reminded of the power of love and support, and the difference it can make in our lives. As I sit here, reflecting on that chaotic wedding day, I'm still trying to process the complex emotions that have been swirling inside me for years. The pain, the anger, the feeling of betrayal, it's all still there, lingering just below the surface. But alongside those emotions, I've also come to realize that I've been given a rare gift, the gift of self-awareness, of knowing my own worth, and of understanding what it means to truly stand up for myself. I remember the days and weeks that followed the wedding, when I felt like I was walking around in a daze, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. My parents, they just seemed to want to sweep it all under the rug, to pretend like nothing had ever happened. But I knew that I couldn't do that. I knew that I had to confront the reality of our situation, to face the fact that my own family had been willing to sacrifice my future for the sake of my sister's wedding. It's funny, looking back on it now, because I used to think that my parents' behavior was just a result of their own flaws, their own weaknesses. But the more I've reflected on it, the more I've come to realize that it's not just about them. It's about the entire dynamic of our family. It's about the way that we've all been conditioned to prioritize certain things, to value certain people over others. And it's about the way that those patterns can be passed down from generation to generation, unless we make a conscious effort to break free from them. For me, that process of breaking free has been a long and difficult one. It's involved a lot of hard work, a lot of self-reflection, and a lot of painful conversations with the people I love. But it's also been incredibly liberating, because I've finally started to understand that I have the power to create my own life, to make my own choices, and to forge my own path. Grandma has been a huge part of that journey, of course. Her unwavering support and guidance have given me the strength to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. And her trust fund, which she so generously set aside for me, has been a tangible reminder of my own worth and value. It's funny, because I used to think that the money was the most important thing, that it was the key to unlocking my future. But now I realize that it's not just about the money, it's about the love, the care, and the consideration that Grandma has shown me, and that she continues to show me to this day. As I look back on that wedding day, I'm reminded of the power of truth, of the way that it can cut through even the most entrenched patterns of behavior and shine a light on the darkest corners of our lives. Grandma's intervention was a wake-up call, not just for me, but for our entire family. It forced us to confront the reality of our own flaws and weaknesses, and to start making amends for the harm that we'd caused. For my sister, Emily, that process has been particularly difficult. She's had to come to terms with the fact that her wedding, which was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, was actually a source of pain and betrayal for me. And she's had to confront the reality of our parents' behavior and the way that they've prioritized her needs over mine. It's not been easy for her, I know, but I'm proud of her for being willing to listen, to learn, and to grow. As for my parents, well, let's just say that our relationship is still a work in progress. We've had some tough conversations, and we've had to work hard to rebuild trust. But I'm trying to be patient, to understand that they're doing the best they can, even if that best isn't always good enough. And I'm trying to focus on the positive, to appreciate the ways in which they've grown and changed over the years. For me, the biggest lesson of all has been the importance of self-advocacy. I've learned that I need to be my own champion, to stand up for myself even when it feels like no one else will. And I've learned that it's okay to ask for help, to seek out support and guidance from the people who care about me. It's not always easy, I know, but it's worth it, because when we take the time to listen to our own hearts, to trust our own instincts, and to prioritize our own needs, we can create a life that's truly authentic, truly meaningful, and truly our own. As I look to the future, I'm excited to see what's in store. I know that there will be challenges, of course, there always are. But I'm ready for them, because I've learned to trust myself, to trust my own inner compass, and to trust the people who have my back. And I know that no matter what happens, I'll always have Grandma's love and support to guide me, to comfort me, and to remind me of my own worth and value. The days following the wedding were a blur for all of us. My sister Emily was visibly shaken, trying to process the revelation that her wedding had been funded by our parents' secret account, and not Grandma's trust fund as we'd all thought. She kept apologizing to me over and over again, but I just hugged her tightly, telling her it wasn't her fault. Mom and Dad were in crisis mode, trying to salvage what was left of their reputation and relationships with the rest of our family. They were defensive and dismissive when we tried to talk about it, insisting that they'd done nothing wrong and that Grandma had overstepped her bounds. But I knew better. I saw the way they looked at me, guilty and ashamed, even as they tried to justify their actions. Grandma, on the other hand, was a rock. She stood firm, calmly explaining to our parents that she'd been planning this for years, waiting for the perfect moment to expose the truth. She told them that it wasn't about revenge or punishment, but about justice and fairness, and about setting me free from their manipulation. As we navigated the aftermath of that day, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was relief, of course, relief that the secret was finally out, and that I could stop carrying around the weight of it all on my own shoulders. But there was also anger, frustration, and hurt, all the feelings I'd been trying to suppress for so long. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Grandma turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Sweetie, I'm so sorry," she said, taking my hand in hers. I know this has been a nightmare for you, and I don't blame you one bit for feeling the way you do. I looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. No one had ever apologized to me like that before, not my parents, who'd always blamed me for their own mistakes. Not even Grandma until now. I just wish they could understand, I said, shaking my head. Why it matters so much to me, why it feels like they've been lying to me all this time. Grandma squeezed my hand gently. I think they do understand deep down, she said, but their pride and ego are getting in the way. They're too scared to admit when they're wrong, and that's what makes it so hard for them to accept the truth. As we talked, Emily slipped into the room, looking anxious and unsure of herself. She sat down beside me on the couch, taking my other hand in hers. Can I talk to you guys? She asked quietly, looking at Grandma with a question in her eyes. Grandma nodded, smiling softly. Of course, sweetie, she said. What's on your mind? Emily took a deep breath before speaking up. I'm so sorry for what happened, she said, turning to me. I know how much this means to you, and I feel terrible that we didn't just be honest with you from the start. I looked at her, feeling a pang of sadness. Emily had never intended for things to go down like they did. She was just caught up in the excitement and stress of planning our wedding. But knowing that didn't make it any easier to forgive. It's not your fault, I said finally, trying to reassure her. You're my sister, and you deserve better than to be treated like this. Grandma put a gentle hand on Emily's knee. She does deserve better, she agreed. And we're all going to work together to make sure that she gets it. As the three of us sat there in silence for a moment, I felt a sense of hope rising up inside me. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new and beautiful, a chance for our family to start over and be honest with each other from now on. But as we talked more about it, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were still so many questions unanswered. So much damage had been done, and healing wouldn't come easily or quickly. We need to have some tough conversations, Grandma said finally, her eyes serious. With our parents, with each other, we all need to work through this together. I nodded in agreement, feeling a sense of determination rising up inside me. I was ready to face the hard stuff head-on, to stand up for myself and demand the respect and honesty that I deserved. Let's do it, I said firmly, looking at Grandma with a smile. Together. As the days went by, our family's dynamics began to shift in ways both subtle and profound. My parents, still reeling from the aftermath of Grandma's revelation, struggled to come to terms with the consequences of their actions. They would often try to justify their behavior, saying that they had only wanted the best for Emily and that I was being too sensitive. But Grandma's words had struck a chord, and I could see the guilt and shame lurking behind their defensive exterior. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to be grappling with her own feelings of regret and responsibility. She would often come to me, tears in her eyes, and apologize for her part in the wedding debacle. I could see that she was genuinely sorry, and I appreciated her willingness to listen and learn. But I also knew that forgiveness wouldn't come easily, not for me, and not for our family as a whole. One evening, as we sat down to dinner, Grandma suggested that we have a family meeting to discuss the issues that had been plaguing us. My parents hesitated at first, but eventually agreed, perhaps realizing that they had no choice but to confront the elephant in the room. The meeting was tense, with emotions running high as we delved into the complexities of our family's dynamics. I just don't understand why you felt the need to manipulate me like that, I said, looking at my parents with a mix of hurt and anger. Why couldn't you just be honest with me from the start? My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact. We were just trying to protect you, sweetie, she said, her voice laced with defensiveness. We didn't want you to feel left out or unimportant, but I knew that wasn't true. I knew that they had been motivated by a desire to control and manipulate, to use me as a means to an end. And I told them so, my voice firm but shaking with emotion. Grandma intervened, her calm and gentle tone a balm to my frazzled nerves. Let's not forget, dear ones, that we're all in this together, she said. We all have our own flaws and weaknesses, and we all make mistakes, but it's how we learn from those mistakes that matters. As we talked, Emily spoke up, her voice hesitant but determined. I want to make things right, guys, she said, looking at me with tears in her eyes. I want to be a better sister, a better daughter. I want to help us heal and move forward. I smiled at her, feeling a sense of hope and gratitude. Maybe, just maybe, we could do this. Maybe we could work through our issues, forgive each other, and emerge stronger and more loving on the other side. The meeting was just the beginning, of course. There were many more conversations to be had, many more tears to be shed, and many more challenges to overcome. But as we sat there, holding hands and looking at each other with a sense of determination and purpose, I knew that we were on the right path. Over the next few weeks, our family began to undergo a transformation. We started attending therapy sessions together, where we could work through our issues in a safe and supportive environment. We learned how to communicate more effectively, how to listen to each other, and how to forgive. It wasn't easy, of course. There were still moments of tension and conflict, moments when I felt like giving up or walking away. But Grandma was always there, a steady presence and a guiding light, reminding me of the importance of family and the power of love and forgiveness. And then, one day, something remarkable happened. My parents came to me, tears in their eyes, and apologized for their behavior. They acknowledged their mistakes, and they took responsibility for the harm they had caused. They promised to do better, to be more honest and transparent, and to support me in my own journey. I was taken aback, to say the least. I had never expected my parents to apologize, to admit their wrongdoing, and take steps to make amends. But as I looked at them, I saw the sincerity in their eyes, and I knew that they were genuinely sorry. "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "Thank you for being brave enough to admit your mistakes and to try to make things right." We hugged, the three of us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace and closure. I knew that our family still had a long way to go, that we would still face challenges and conflicts in the future. But I also knew that we were on the right path, that we were working together to heal and to grow. As I looked at Grandma, I saw a sense of pride and satisfaction in her eyes. She had been the catalyst for our family's transformation, the one who had pushed us to confront our flaws and weaknesses. And I knew that I would always be grateful to her for her love and support, and for her unwavering commitment to our family's well-being. "I love you, Grandma," I said, hugging her tightly. "I love you too, sweetie," she replied, smiling. "And I'm so proud of the strong, brave woman you're becoming."